I go on vacation for a week. Well, 2 weeks. And boy, oh boy, is the news filled with AI. Now, not in a direct way, but in a roundabout way, with only a few companies openly admitting what everyone already knows. The reason why there are so many tech layoffs right now is because AI is doing those people's work. What you used to need tons and tons and tons of employees for are now being replaced with AI. And the level of propaganda going on about companies not being very open with the fact that they are using AI shows more about the indirect way companies wish to present themselves to the public. Oh, we overhired during the pandemic. Oh, we're right-sizing and all the other excuses that they give. But in reality, no, those jobs are permanently lost thanks to the advancement of technology. And if you're in technology, this is not a new concept for you. In fact, it should be very readily apparent that you are entering into a field that is predicated upon technology replacing the old with the new. And in fact, this very field is its whole premise. And I use a perfect example of like the phone companies. Way back when, they used to have things called switchboard operators who actually unplugged the cables and routed calls where they needed to go. Well, as time moved forward, as technology moved forward, a whole cacophony of technologies emerged that made that position completely irrelevant. You no longer needed a physical person plugging in. You now had an automated machine, and then eventually it became all internet protocol. And so those positions got wiped out. And people who are in tech should be aware of this, that the whole reason why they're there is to figure out how to automate themselves away. And if anyone in tech tells you otherwise, they are being dishonest, because in reality, everyone who is in tech, who is doing their job, is helping automate their own position away over time. Just look at the job postings today. Move forward 10 years and you'll see the vast majority of whatever jobs you see right now are going to be replaced because automation already took over. And you see that with systems engineers. They'll do a boatload of work and then all of a sudden they'll deploy it. Instead of having tons of people running around to KVM switches and server racks, inputting this information code by code, highly inefficient, by the way. They press one button and like a organized symphony, all the machines get updated and deployed in real time. And just one person could do what used to require scores and scores of people. So yes, people getting hired into tech to figure out how to automate these hard business problems only to be fired by tech should not be a surprise to anyone. So only natural that when tech has a massive bleed out right now, like it is experiencing, there's going to be a lot of upset people because they haven't realized that the very, very field that they're in is predicated upon their removal. Now, that's not true with all industries, but it is uniquely with tech. So when I see AI being deployed like this, at least I prefer companies be very upfront about it, but they don't want to. And I alluded to the reason why earlier, and that it's propaganda, and that's true. At first, you deny, then you distract, then you state, wow, it's always been here anyways. And that's what's going on. That's the playbook happening right now. But I'm going to say it. I'm going to tell it as it is. No, it's AI replacing them. And I know this because I firsthand experienced AI replacing me over and over and over again. And I know that's the case because what I was hired to do and what I'm doing now are completely different. You say, well, no, weren't you upskilled? Yes, there is some upskilling going on, but also the weird work that I did within a week, AI was trained on that, knew how to do it better than I, and was doing it at all hours of the day. And it just happened over and over and over again. They give me a new task. I would figure it out using all my knowledge and skill set I'd acquired up to that point. The AI would train on it and bam, I'm back to doing the same thing the next week. And it was constant change week over week after week. And I experienced that. It was initially disheartening because, when it's very drilled into you how utterly replaceable you are with AI, it was difficult initially to come to grips with that everything that I was taught up to that point, that if I got the higher education, that if I pursued, this degree in technology and I pursued technology further, that I would find a way to make myself irreplaceable. And in reality, no one is irreplaceable. And that's always a tough pill to swallow, because that's not what society tells you. Society tells you that you are irreplaceable, that you're a unique person, and reality is very, very different from that fact. So, when I observed AI replacing all the work and experience that I acquired up until that point, initially, yes, it was very disheartening, but I'm a very optimistic person, so I stuck with it. And the company I'm with stuck with me. And together, not only did we automate all the previously difficult but ultimately automatable tasks, it allowed me to then pursue things I otherwise couldn't before, because AI opened those doors to me, because I'm no longer stuck doing, essentially at this point, minutia work. Now, for other people, that might be their whole lives, but most people don't want to be defined by minutia. And it gave me some time to pause and reflect as I was watching myself be completely automated away, into thinking what the future might hold in an economy and in a culture that we are in right now, that is dealing with the remains of the Protestant work ethic, that is predicated upon short-term profits over medium or long-term gains, that is very nihilistic in its focus, where people's whole lives are defined by what they do. And it led me down an interesting road, in that, what would society and economies look like when self-interest is no longer a major factor in driving the economy forward? Now, as humans, we are very motivated by self-interest, and it does lead to short-sightedness. It leads to lapses in judgment, and it's not something that is good as a species long-term if all we make is short-term decisions, not medium-term or long-term. And so we have a choice with this AI, which probably will replace 90% of jobs in the next 10 years. Now, I may be overly optimistic, and I do admit I am an optimistic, positive person. So we'll see how correct I am. But if 90% of jobs are replaced, what replaces the economic model and system that everything was predicated and based upon? And so right now, our economy is very capitalistic, and capitalism is what we have right now. There's socialism, and socialism, from the results I've seen, it never works out. So that precludes then government control over what's happening. And I may argue that in the future, communities will own the distribution of profit that the AIs generate, and what has probably been titled universal generous income. And then you have the question, well, if universal generous income is being provided to give people economic agency, so that way they could spend money on the services that keep the economy moving forward, you have a situation as, well, what happens to our culture so predicated upon work being a definer of one's self? And that leads us into a new economy. I would give it the term the experience and meaning economy, or EM economy for short. Or maybe it could be the other way around. Perhaps it could be the meaning and experience economy, the me economy. It does sound better when you turn it into an acronym. So what is the me economy about? Well, it'd be predicated upon either experiences whereby people will go out and get a massage, or they will have deliveries of some sort, not necessarily like Uber, but perhaps they'll have deliveries of experiences they couldn't get elsewhere that other humans create for humans to enjoy. Well, not everyone can do that. In fact, we'll say the vast majority of people who have ever tried to become a YouTuber have never really achieved that. But if people are able to provide value for people through these mediums of experiences that people can consume and they get rewarded, that could provide status and a means by which people can self-make themselves by creating their own shows, like the Joe Rogan Experience or otherwise. And there is definitely a place for that, but not everyone could be a part of the experience economy. For instance, if everyone's a creator, no one's a creator. So then that leaves the others, which is the meaning economy. And this is going to be probably the hardest to implement, particularly in our culture, because we're so focused on deriving meaning from work that people don't realize you can derive meaning from hobbies. You could derive meaning from what you choose to do. And people have made the argument that work doesn't feel like work when you're enjoying it. And that's true. If you truly enjoy what you're doing and it gives you meaning to you, then it's not really work per se. So if someone really enjoys the ability to go out and go fish, and then they just happen to sell the fish, that would be part of the meaning economy because they find that meaningful. And they'd be able to do it too because they would have the universal generous income to be able to say, yes, I do want a cheap boat. I do want to go out on the lake this morning or the river or the ocean. I want to go fishing. That's how I get meaning, and that's what I'm going to do. Or I want to create art and then sell it. And people can pursue what they find meaningful. Now, that does delve deeply into philosophy, and in some ways, meaning is a human construct. In fact, I would say most ways meaning is a human construct. So I don't want to get too distracted with that, but it is entirely possible that if someone says, you know what, I want to have meaning with creation of new ideas that turn into businesses, they could easily do that. And in fact, right now there's rumors going around in the Valley that there's a desire of the first billion-dollar unicorn comprised entirely of one or two founders. Now, we have this concept in society of the self-made man. And Obama said it once that you didn't bill that to people who claim to be self-made because of the roads and the infrastructure and the education that were provided to people, allowed them to use those resources and capital together to build up their industry, and then they claim to be self-made. Well, in that same vein of a self-made person, it's entirely possible that if people find meaning in composing interesting ideas together to turn into businesses, they can use AI to construct those services. And then, yes, they can be the next billion-dollar unicorn. And in fact, I suggest that probably will be the primary use of AI once AI is ubiquitous. And I was recently discussing that AI adoption is happening faster than anyone thinks. And it's not just happening here, it's happening around the world faster than anyone thinks. Because if people had a choice, and I mentioned this in the previous episode, between waiting for a doctor to come next month with potentially a malaria cure or their cell phone giving them detailed instructions how to make a homemade remedy at home that's accurate and useful for treating malaria until, whatever medicine arrives, then they're going to use that AI on their phone. And they're going to not really care that it's not credentialed, especially if it's giving them accurate information about how to improve their lives day to day, how to think through things. And that becomes even more effective with multimodal models, which are able to see through a cell phone camera, use AI vision to identify where things are, and is able to construct using building materials that people have access to, incredibly strong structures that people could then have step-by-step instructions to follow, and you'll see AI rapid adoption around the world faster than you think. It's only in the, highly developed countries will AI be simultaneously faster adopted than anyone thinks and also slower adopted. It's a contradiction, but it pans out. And hear me out here. In highly developed societies, you have legacy infrastructure. because it was built first in those societies. They had, of course, benefit from first mover advantage, but it also, that legacy holds them back from what rapidly is becoming the future. And I will use Japan and China as textbook examples. After World War II, Japan was devastated. So they rapidly modernized. They deployed the best technology they had available at that time to their population and deployed infrastructure like you have never seen. And that includes fiber deployments to people's homes. Well, over time, people shifted from being home all the time to being out and about, and they started carrying around cell phones. And those cell phones consumed massive amounts of data. And so the priority no longer was a solid internet connection in their home, but how good of an internet connection can they get on their phone? So the priority became infrastructure to the towers. Now, do they benefit from already having infrastructure already deployed that they could easily hook up to get cell phone towers everywhere? Yes. But the societal adoption was a lot slower. And so you have a situation in Japan where, though they have incredibly modern infrastructure, they're still using flip phones instead of smartphones. Whereas in China, where they didn't necessarily have that massive infrastructure deployment post-World War II, instead, they, in many ways, skipped that whole deployment of fiber to people's homes, and they deployed fiber to cell phone towers, and now their entire societies run off of cell phones. The smarter the cell phone, the better. Payment, mobile processing, everything's handled by the cell phones. And that was a cultural shift to adopt the new versus Japan, which was more focused on, hey, if it works, don't break it. And that's true. But then you end up with situations where Panasonic, at least until last year, and in fact, I still think it's going on, is still selling laptops with CD-ROM drives in them, when USB flash drives exist, because CD-ROM drives, well, they still work, right? But you still have that legacy of infrastructure that people still hold over. So, I know I've talked quite a lot, but there was so much on my mind I wanted to talk about since I've been out and about. And I hope that you enjoyed my take. I will see you next week.